Tim's News Explosion. 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 Tim's News Explosion.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tim's News Explosion on this glorious Monday, the 16th of October, 2023. We are live on the Wilmsfront YouTube channel, the Wilmsfront Odyssey channel, and the Wilmsfront Rumble channel. I'm back to Entropy now. I could figure out how to work the new system. So if you want to send through a super chat message to support not just this program, but other Unshackled productions, then I've put the link into the YouTube live chat. Hello to Peak Aussie Men, Vignal, Dawn Browning. It is 9 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria. And for the first time in a long time, I am a proud Victorian because Victoria, like every other state in Australia, voted down, said no to enshrining an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice in our constitution. Australia is back. This is MAGA country, because obviously MAGA also means make Australia great again. And there is optimism now that we can turn the corner. We can, middle Australia, ordinary Australians, working Australians, take back Australia from the elites and the communists who are trying to take control away from us. And the voice was a weapon that they wanted to use, using Aboriginal grievance, white guilt, accusations of racism, fake history. Why don't we have a look at the update, the latest of the glorious count? Let's have a look at this. So this is the ABC's, well, it's basically their computerized republication of the referendum vote, but it's got it all in graphics there. So Anthony Green, the ABC's elections and referendum analyst, he called a victory for the no vote at 7:30 p.m., which was Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time. So when the polls had only just closed in Queensland, they hadn't even closed in WA. And so if we look at the national count, so almost 79% counted. Yes, it is at less than 40% now, 39.3%, 5.43 million votes, while no, a whopping 60.7% of the vote. And it's probably going to get larger now as they've counted the pre-polls. I mean, absentee and postal votes. So 8.38 million no votes so far. New South Wales voted no. The margin is currently at 40.4% yes, 59.6% no. Victoria, and this is what even blew some on the right side of politics minds, that Dan Andrews, when he was ruling over us, he said that Victoria was the most progressive state in Australia. Well, it was progressive in that it had the highest yes vote, but it wasn't a majority of Victorian voters. I've moved in for you a bit there. So Victoria, 45% yes, 55% no. Tasmania, remember the poll, several polls said that Tasmania would be the only state to vote yes. No one convincingly. Yes only managed 40.5%, and no was 59.5%. South Australia, where the Yes campaign was launched by Anthony Albanese, Peter Malinauskas, the South Australian Labor Premier. He was probably the Labor Premier who most attached himself to the voice. So South Australia, they voted it down significantly, 35.2% yes, 64.8% no. Queensland, number one for no, 31.1% yes, 68.9% no. Western Australia, the margin wasn't quite as big as some were predicting for Western Australia, but it was still an easy victory for no, 36.2% for yes, 63.8% for no. The Northern Territory, where 30% of the population is Indigenous, 39.5% voted yes, 60.5% voted no. The ACT, the Canberra bubble, well, which is full of public servants and other lefties living off the taxpayer teat, only jurisdiction in Australia to vote yes, though they only just scraped over 60.8% yes, 39.2% no. And so this is an even bigger victory for the no vote than in the 1999 Australian Republican referendum, which is the last referendum that Australians were asked to vote on to change the constitution. So that was 45.13% yes and 54.87% no. And the results, it was only the ACT that voted yes. And like it was the same with the early polling for the Republic referendum as it was for the Voice referendum. The polls started overwhelmingly yes. In fact, that's the history of referendum questions in Australia, that they tend to, when the feeler is put out, how do you feel about changing the constitution for this? The people are receptive to it initially, but when they look at the detail, then they look and hang on, this doesn't seem like a good idea. And this is what Australians eventually figured out about the Voice. The more they heard about it, the more they learnt that it could lead to constitutional chaos with this. And remember, Anthony Albanese said, we'll sort out the detail afterward. It wasn't just a voice to Parliament, it was a voice to the executive. With the High Court, given its judicial activist history, I mean, it just made up the Mabo and Wick land rights decision. We don't know if they could have held up the decisions of government if the High Court decided that that the Voice wasn't consulted enough by governments. Now, the Yes campaign, which, despite the fact that they said that this was about helping those Aborigines in rural and remote areas, it was the inner cities where, well, a lot of white people live, although there are a lot of Aborigines there, but a lot of them are varying percentage of Aboriginals. So it was the inner city electorates in Melbourne and Sydney that voted overwhelmingly yes. So going back to the ABC here, they had this interactive electorate graphic here. I'm not sure if you can see it there. I'll put the electorates there. So the yes votes are in purple. The no electorates, I should say, are in orange. And you can see in inner Melbourne there, the inner city Labor, Green and Teal seats all voted yes. There was not a Liberal seat in Victoria that voted yes. At the moment, the only Liberal seat that looks to have voted yes is Bradfield, which is held by a shadow, I think he's Communications Minister, Paul Fletcher. So though it was only barely a majority there, 51-49, and former Shadow Attorney General and Indigenous Affairs spokesman Julian Leeser, who resigned from the front bench to advocate for a yes vote, was part of the cringe Liberals for Yes, and they look absolutely like fools today. So his seat of Barawa, 53.4% no. Bridget Archer, another Liberal for Yes, in Launceston, Tasmania, 61.8% no, 38.2% yes. She looks very foolish there. And the multicultural Labor electorates in Sydney and Melbourne all voted no, although Kos Samaras, Dan Andrews, former deputy campaign director and now director at Redbridge Polling, according to him, the silver lining, and I've got the tweet here, is that Melbourne's Indian community apparently voted yes. So he said the polling place in Mickleham, the federal seat of Colwell, it was at the Yagala Primary School, one of the few booths that recorded a win for yes in that seat. This suburb is now almost 60% Australian Indian enrolled voters, a bit lower. This community did not have to wait for the Yes campaign to reach out to them. That would have taken a few years, if ever. They voted yes because they are acutely aware of what the Brits have done to them and the Aboriginal Australians. Is that why they spend more time these days fighting each other instead of apparently the white British Empire that oppress them? I mean, they still play cricket, but Kos Samaras, he's a demographics is destiny guy, and you could tell when obviously the polling wasn't going the way that he wanted, the sneering that, oh, it's the uneducated, poorer, and boomers who are all voting no, i.e. implying that if you're educated and smart and earn a lot of money and live in a nice suburb, you're going to be informed enough to vote yes. Now, Kos doesn't need to advocate for more Indian immigration into Australia. That's already happening anyway. But that is the Labor, why Labor still believes that they can keep winning federal and state elections, is just based on demographics, because these multicultural areas, they may have voted no to the Voice, but they'll still vote yes for the Labor Party. Peter Dutton, he certainly hasn't, is not in the box seat to win the next election. Anthony Albanese may have shot himself in the foot, but a shot in the foot is not fatal. Now, that's enough nerdy numbers from the referendum. Now let's get into the salty aftermath, the leftist tears. I've got some spare tissues if you'd like some, lefties, because well, we're all expecting a massive dummy spit. Like, this is the first vote in Australia they've lost since COVID. I mean, they all lost their minds after the 2019 federal elections, but they've had wins ever since. So we had this from the Chaser, who used to be funny. So Opera House to be lit up in white to commemorate no victory. Well, isn't the Opera House always white? It's always lit up in white. I'm not sure that that's a joke there. Catherine Rowlandson, one half of the Rowlandson twins, the Labor rusted on drip stands. Her sister Victoria Rowlandson is also she's a massive progressive leftard. Every yes voter is hurting, seething, livid with Dutton, Price, Mundine. Every no voter hasn't given it a second thought, apathetic. The Liberal Party should take a very hard look at it. Every booth, LGA state and federal seat where yes polled well. Baseball bats out next poll. Well, you might have the baseball bats, which I should also clarify that's not an incitement to violence. It's a Australian election political expression that voters, when they vote out a government because they hate them, they're ready to throw them out with baseball bats. It was actually termed by Michael Lavarge, who was Paul Keating's Attorney General when he lost his seat in Queensland at the 1996 federal election. Now, I saw Dawn Brown, Lady of Shalott, enjoyed our referendum night stream, which was obviously a joint stream with Right Minds NZ. We brought back Trad Tasman Talk for a night because it was the New Zealand general election there, and another good result with the Hipkins Dern Labor government thrown out. We'll get to the updates of those results, but let's get to the as I said, get back to the salty aftermath. So this was Thomas Mayo, the communist Yes campaigner, who's, well, Torres Strait Islander ethnicity. It's not exactly clear, but of course he blamed disinformation. They already had the excuses ready to go: mis and disinformation, racism, white supremacist propaganda, you name it. So this was him at the Yes, well, commiserations.
I think that the proposal that we have made is the right one. We need a voice, we need that structural change, and we got it right at Uluru. But we have seen a disgusting no campaign, a campaign that has been dishonest, that has lied to the Australian people, and I'm sure that'll come out in the analysis. I'm sure that history will reflect poorly on Peter Dutton, Pauline Hanson, all of those that have opposed this. And so, you know, I don't know what's next, but it's just devastating. I disagree that this was a bad idea. Because I know that we needed that foundational change, you know, to be recognised and to have a guaranteed representative body. Not politicians that purport to speak for us, like the one that we've just heard. Not having political parties choose Indigenous people for us, but having us choose our leaders ourselves. We got that right. I'm not blaming the Australian people at all, but who I do blame and who I hope that the Australian people will look very closely at the next time they have a say in this democracy about who our leadership is. I hope they look at who lied to the Australian people. I think Albanese was courageous. I think he was empathetic. I think he genuinely wanted this change, and he has done the right thing by putting it to the people. So it's not his fault. It's not the Australian people's fault. It's the people that have lied to us, to the Australian people. They are the ones that we should be blaming.
Using the words of of the recently emerged Australian meme, "Have a sock, cunt." Now, that was on the ABC. They were in mourning, and they were even more glum-faced over on the National Indigenous Television Network, NITV, which is part of SBS. And they had a Marsha Langton on. Of course, she was one of the designers of The Voice and proposed the 25-member model, Canberra-based model, which Anthony Albanese said will work out after the election how they're elected. This was her on NITV as no result was confirmed.
So it's not true that I think Australians are racist, and I want to say a big thank you to the 50,000 volunteers who worked hard on the campaign with us to try to achieve a yes vote for a very simple proposition that would recognise us as the Indigenous peoples of Australia, our ancestors having come 60,000 years ago. Not about race. It's not about race at all, and that was my message. This question was not about race. The No campaign have turned it into a racially divisive proposition when it is not at all. Being Indigenous does not mean that we are members of the imaginary 19th century race that was put into the Constitution and remains in the Constitution.
You cannot say that putting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander in a constitution, which all my life and all my parents' life and all my grandparents' life is we were Aboriginal is a race. Torres Strait Islanders are a race, and then to pretend that by putting those things in the constitution, it is not about putting a race in the constitution.
Now, it got more heated after that with Marsha Langton and Noel Pearson, because Marsha Langton, obviously, she chose her words carefully. She's still denying that she called, she said that many of the no campaigners are spewing racism, or the no arguments are either based in racism or sheer stupidity. She denied that she called Australians racist, even though she said in years back Australia was a horrible and racist country. So Warren Mundine, he fired up and decided to call her BS. And Marsha Langton, she was borrowing the Noel Pearson argument. Oh, this is not about race, it's about recognizing that our distinctive race was on the continent before European settlement. Again, it's not bought. So this is where Warren Mundine decided to call out Marsha Langton as well. She was putting on a nice face that night.
In this country and moving forward, Warren, and fixing the problems that we have in Aboriginal
just going to interrupt you there, because
I'm not going to sit here and cop lies from people.
Well, we're not going to sit here and take you abusing a national treasure like Marsha Langton, who never said that Australians were racist,
and you must accept
and her words were twisted. I'm going to stop you there, Warren.
People make the decisions.
I think, well, we've just seen who Warren Mundine is.
Yes, that's right.
Do you have anything further to add?
I didn't say that Australians are racist. And that there was a man videoing what I said in Bunbury, and he sent his video through to Shari Markson, and she said, she only played one part of it, and she said that I was accusing Australians of being racist. That is not what I said. What I said was that the messaging of the No campaign is based in some racialist assumptions.
They referred to Marsha Langton as a national treasure. How do you get to be a national treasure of a country that you call horrible and racist? And yeah, clearly there was no objectivity there. I can't remember her name, that presenter. I will look it up. They're presenters of the NIT program, The Point. So it is co-hosted by, let me get the name. So I'm not. So it's hosted by Nerida Jacobs, that was the woman there, and John Paul Janko. John Paul Janko, he was on Insiders the next day. I'll get to what was said by one of the ABC's several Indigenous reporters, Isabella Higgins, on Insiders in a moment. But Warren Mundine, he continued to be fired up when he got these disgusting loaded bias questions from the ABC Radio National host Patricia Karlvelas, who's been so biased throughout the campaign with her pro-voice stance, hectoring and interrupting no campaigners and basically giving most yes activists a free pass. This was her trying to have a go at Warren Mundine because the result didn't go the way she wanted.
You've certainly won tonight. Have you won?
Australian people won.
Well, is reconciliation now dead in this country?
Oh, no way it's dead. Australia has been on a journey now for 30 years. and we've had a wonderful journey moving forward. Just because a proposal that was put forward was rejected by the Australian public, there's two things that really I've heard in the polling booths and I've heard around Australia is one, they want practical outcomes for Indigenous people. They're sick and tired of governments mucking up things. They want it to be fixed. And of course, the other thing is they do want to have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people recognised in the Constitution as the first people of this country, and they are very proud of the Aboriginal people and its history.
Thomas Mayer spoke to the ABC a little earlier, our colleague Isabella Higgins, and said that he's not angry with the Australian people. He believes the No campaign ran a dirty campaign of lies. There were many things that your campaign said that weren't true. Do you regret taking that approach?
I reject your what you just said.
The idea of dividing on racial division when there's already race in the Constitution, that's not factual.
Well, the factual is that I'm Aboriginal. All my life I've been told I'm a member of the Aboriginal race. My parents have been told that they're a member of the Aboriginal race, and therefore it is race.
Now, Patricia Karlvelas is Greek, FYI, same as Kos Samaras. There's hardly any conservative Greeks that are represented in Australia's mainstream media. They all seem to be basic communists after the great migration to Australia after World War II. Most of the Greeks who came here were communists because the Greek communists lost the Civil War after World War II. So that is another Australian history fact. Now, Patricia Karlvelas, when she was saying that there is race in our constitution, that is section 51, which says that it enables the Commonwealth to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of the Commonwealth with respect to, and one of them is the people of any race for whom it is deemed necessary to make special laws. Now, the 1967 referendum, which seems to have been memory hold now, mentioned the people of any race apart from the Aboriginal race. And part of the reason for the 1967 referendum, which was bipartisan, is so that the federal government could make laws for Aboriginal Australians, and also it allowed them to be counted in the official census statistics that carried with 90% of the vote. But obviously, Lydia Thorpe was the most prominent progressive no campaigner. She is going to be on Q&A tonight with Patricia Karlvelas. She's still the golden girl of the ABC. I wonder if Lydia Thorpe would have voted no in 1967 because she wanted Aborigines to remain separate from Australia. Well, she still doesn't recognise Australia because, remember, sovereignty was never ceded. We don't actually, Australia doesn't actually exist. And that's why now, despite the overwhelming no vote, we still had confirmation from our Premier here in Victoria, Jacinta Allen, that she would still negotiate a treaty with the Victorian First Peoples Assembly, which only those who will have who are accepted as Aboriginal, no matter how much percentage, as well, there's no blood test that's allowed to be made. So only they are allowed to vote and be elected at the taxpayer expense, of course. One way to solve Victoria's budget crisis is to completely sack that First Peoples Assembly and tear up the treaty negotiations. Anastasia Palaszczuk, the Queensland Premier, she also released a statement as well. I think I've got it here. I'll just bring it up. But now, Anastasia Palaszczuk, I should say, while I bring up this statement, is that She was a Labor premier. She voted yes, but she didn't actively campaign because she, well, saw that Queensland was going to be an overwhelmingly no state. The new premier of Western Australia, Roger Cook, hardly campaigned either because, well, he had caused given the no campaigner gift and caused irreparable damage to the yes campaign with his disastrous Aboriginal cultural heritage laws, which basically gave some anointed Aboriginal the power of veto of what pastoralists and miners could do on their own property if they were going a certain amount of millimeters underground. Anastasia Palaszczuk, she said, the Australian people have spoken and their voice tells me they're not ready, not yet. Is she implying that we're going to be asked again because they didn't like the answer? I respect that. They never get it wrong. Well, clearly she says that they got it wrong for now. What I'm confident all Australians do agree the need to improve the well-being of First Nations peoples. We are a generous nation. We extend our hearts and hands to all. This wasn't the right way. I acknowledge the strong feedback that won't stop our efforts to bring justice, reconciliation, and material improvement to the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. But she's still going to negotiate a treaty with Queensland Aboriginals, and the LNP opposition leader, David Crisafulli, he's given bipartisanship to it. Now, he voted no, but he didn't campaign for it, even though, well, it would have been to his electoral advantage. The metaphorical baseball bats are already out for Anastasia Palaszczuk and Labor for next year's Queensland state election. They've been there for 9 years, so I don't know why Crisafulli went in so limp-wristed. Now, obviously, Warren Mundine, he was a powerful no voice, but obviously the most, you would say, prominent and outstanding no campaigner of part Indigenous heritage was Country Liberal Party Senator Jacinta Price. Her National Press Club speech, where she dismissed the concept of intergenerational trauma and said that there's only positive ongoing effects from British colonization on First Nations people. That will go down in history as a turning point when, well, the black armband view of Australian history began to be taken off. Now, that was a term coined in the 80s by historian Geoffrey Blaney, who's still alive. I think he's in his late 80s or 90s now. I've got some of his books behind me. He's a fantastic historian. And Jacinta Price, she also said that the reason there is lots of crime, dysfunction, violence, sexual abuse in remote Indigenous communities is because of traditional Aboriginal culture, not because of anything the white man has done. And Jacinta Price also slapped down that the Australian people fell for misinformation. Or remember Ray Martin saying, if you don't know, find out what you don't know. Vote no then if you're a dinosaur or a dickhead. But Jacinta Price, she debunked that misinformation about misinformation, and that there was a detail that you could look up.
And it has been a shame that throughout the campaign that we have been accused of misleading this country through disinformation and misinformation when it was a campaign of no information whatsoever. And that we called out where the Australian people were being misled, whether it was the claim that 80% of Indigenous Australians supposedly supported this when we know that they didn't, when it was the claim that this was just a simple advisory body when the words advice, advise, or advisory didn't even appear in the question nor the proposed chapter. The Australian people were misled, and the Australian people saw this for themselves. And that is why the Australian people decided to vote no to this proposal.
Now, on Sunday, the one of the copium strategies of the Yes advocates, and well, putting forward their narrative that trying to put forward their narrative that this is what First Nations people wanted. They published the results of the 22 Northern Territory remote polling teams. So they're the AEC vans that travel to remote communities and get them to cast their vote. So 21 out of 22 remote mobile teams voted yes. There was one that was voted no. Now, Jacinta Price, she at the 2019 federal election ran for this seat of Lingiari, and back then she talked about how that the Labor campaign machine were very proactive in making sure that they could bus Aboriginal people into towns and centres where they could cast a vote for the Labor Party. And so Jacinta Price, when she was asked about this, she said that the AEC, whose performance had left a lot to be desired. They didn't get any polling booths in Melbourne CBD. There was 2-hour waits at Docklands and Southbank for people to cast a valid vote. The confusion when they said ticks would be accepted but crosses not. And obviously we had then the snipey AEC Twitter X account as well, but I digress. Now, Jacinta Price, she questioned that it was those Aboriginals in remote communities were allowed to make up their own minds in secret ballots, because she talked about how campaigners were allowed to come with them and basically push poll them. It was what's been done in the Northern Territory to get the Aboriginal vote. It was an early, it set the groundwork for the Democrats' mail-in ballot vote harvesting in the 2020 presidential election, where you basically help the person to fill out their ballot and help them mail it back. I mean, there were reports that dementia patients in nursing homes were manipulated to vote yes. So Jacinta Price was asked about this by none other than Patricia Karlvelas of the ABC. And as you'll see in the footage I'm about to play, Warren Mundine decided that he'd had enough of Patricia Karlvelas as hectoring and copium.
Agenda. I think going ahead, we probably need to look at the way in which the AEC, the NTEC conduct themselves when it comes to remote polling at elections, at referendums. I think we should take away those who come in with their how to votes, the unions that come in and overpower vulnerable Aboriginal people in those communities. There is a lot that goes on in remote communities that the rest of Australia doesn't get to see. If we had cameras in those remote communities, at those polling booths, Australia would see what goes on within those communities. There's a lot of manipulation.
You know what? People are committing suicides in these communities. People are being raped and beaten, and this is the questions you come up with? Where's about getting results? Getting people reducing suicide, and instead of this nonsense that you people carry on with. It's about time. We had a vote tonight that said Australians want to get things done. Well, stop talking about all this other nonsense and actually start talking about those kids and those who are young as 9 and 10 who commit suicide in their communities, and those kids who get raped and pillaged, and people who haven't got jobs, for God's sake. You know, wake up to yourselves and start asking real questions and making governments accountable. Thank you. Thank you.
Now, that was a extremely based rant there by Warren, but I don't think he should be Prime Minister because he's still quite a centrist when it comes to treaties, and he still advocates for local Indigenous tribes to be able to make individual treaties with governments, while Jacinta Price, she is much more in favour of Australia being at one. Remember, at a press club speech, she said that hopefully very soon there won't have to be a need for an Indigenous Australians minister because Australians will be helped on the basis of need, not race. And there's been multiple reports in newspapers from Liberal Party MPs who they think that Jacinta Price is a future prime ministerial material, because obviously Peter Dutton coming out as the opposition leader, coming out so strongly for the no, along with the Liberal front bench and most of the MPs, but it was the fact that Jacinta Price, part Aboriginal, she and her mother Bess Price lived their whole lives in remote and rural the Northern Territory. They've seen the violence and the sexual abuse firsthand. They know what really needs to happen to close the gap, and it is certainly not more money or more virtue signaling or more grievance. Though I think it was Alex Hawke, a Liberal MP, who said that Jacinta, she joined the wrong party, because if she sits with the National Party, so the National Party, the highest you can get to is Deputy Prime Minister, and Jacinta Price is in the wrong house. She's in the Senate. The Prime Minister comes from the House of Representatives. She failed in her 2019 campaign to win the seat of Lingiari, though she was up against an incumbent, Warren Snowden, and she saw his campaign machine in action in those remote and rural Indigenous communities. He's now retired, Warren Snowden. She could give it another crack if she was, and country Liberal Party MPs and senators, they can choose whether to caucus with the Liberal Party or the National Party. Now, yesterday, I decided to write my own analysis of what the Aboriginal voice defeat meant for Australia's future. And obviously, I titled tonight's show, Australia is Back. And this was as I said, it was a strong rebuke of Australians. They didn't want this self-appointed Aboriginal elite and their allies to have this thing in the Constitution, which was fraught with uncertainty. One of the things that was repeated by many voters that was called misinformation was that, well, we don't know if this will lead to us losing our house. But the Yes campaign, they could say that's never going to happen, but it's still completely unknown legal phenomena, because, as I said, the High Court with the Mabo decision that it just made up out of thin air in 1992, which they decided to 6 out of the 7 justices confer English common law legal rights to native title. They voided terra nullius, that Australia was no man's land. And the Wick decision, the High Court decided, it was a 4-3, that native title could coexist with pastoral and mining leases, meaning that you could own property, but there could be a native title claim on it. But the High Court still said, if there's a conflict, then the native title claim is overridden. Now, John Howard was the Prime Minister at the time of the Wick decision at the end of 1996. And the reason why he won in a landslide in 1996 is because the Australians were sick of Paul Keating's virtue signalling on the Aboriginal issue, his Redfern speech, his embrace of land rights and native title, which, as we saw further with the Wick decision. I mean, who knows what the High Court, they could have decided something if the voice passed more extreme than the Wick decision. So John Howard won because they believed that, well, Paul Keating was out of touch and arrogant. He was schmoozing with these Aboriginal elite who were wanting to erode the rights of property owners and not looking after the interests of all Australians who were doing it tough in the rebound from the 1990 recession. This was John Howard on the ABC 7:30 report on, I think, 1997, talking about how native title claims were already going out of control and what Labor and the Democrats wanted.
Let me just show your viewers that this shows 78% of the land mass of Australia coloured brown on this map. Now, the Labor Party and the Democrats are effectively saying that the Aboriginal people of Australia should have the potential right of veto over further development of 78% of the land mass of Australia.
Now, the 78% figure that John Howard quoted didn't come to fruition, in part because of his Wick 10-point plan, which eventually passed the House of Representatives and the Senate. Though the land claims was basically a land grab, because what happens when vacant land, it's mainly vacant land that's claimed by these land councils, land corporations, it's just locked up and the rest of Australia isn't allowed to go in it. That's the same with Arnhem Land. You can't even go into an area of your own country without the permission of the people who live there. I mean, I have no say about who comes to Melbourne or Victoria, let alone who comes into the Australian country. So Keith Windschuttle's book, The Breakup of Australia. I'll have to zoom in on this if I can. There we go here. So the dark green, that is native title exist exclusive. The light green is native title exist non-exclusive. The brown is native title does not exist. The orange is native title extinguished. Not within determined area, and the blue is the claimant has applications that have complied with the registration test. So going further down here, Keith Windschuttle at the moment, so almost 50%, 49.3% of Australian landmass is, well, you could basically say it's not under the jurisdiction of the Australian government, because a lot of in these native title areas, it's often tribal law that is enforced, not Australian law. And tribal law it's very, very sexist, and obviously it does not have equality before the law and a fair justice system. Another 13.4% is subject to claimant applications. And this is really what I think needs to be the next step in after this referendum, rolling back this native title, that this land is basically not part of Australia anymore. I mean, all of Australia should be under Australian law. All Australians should be able to go there. And also in the battle over treaties, as I said before, is not over. Victoria and Queensland, Labor governments are still going to go ahead, basically ignoring their voters. And South Australia and Labor Premier Peter Malinauskas is still going to have the South Australian voice to Parliament. So he's just sticking his finger up at his voters as well. So particularly the Labor side still hasn't got the message, and the Conservative side of politics, their spine that they finally found to oppose the voice, they need to keep that in place and oppose all of the proposed treaty negotiations, because you're basically saying that there needs to be a treaty. You're basically saying that Australia doesn't exist. And plus, these self-appointed negotiators, and a lot of them are part Aboriginal, how do they know what their descendants on their Aboriginal side were thinking 200 years ago? They don't have a time machine that they can see and negotiate on people they never met's behalf. And now Anthony Albanese and his Labor cabinet ministers, they are still in denial. Anthony Albanese gave a speech that he clearly did not write, saying that while he accepted the result of the Australian people, he had no regrets, because he said, this is what First Nations people asked us to do with the Uluru Statement from the heart. And he said, I've never been prouder when I was in the red dirt at Uluru. He still believes that it was only signed by 250 Australian Aboriginals. It gives it this godlike status. And basically what he was saying is that and what the Labor government said, because remember, Anthony Albanese got up on election night and said, we embrace the Uluru Statement from the heart in full, voice, truth, treaty. And so this was all done. The Australian people were busy with like their day-to-day lives, during 2017, when this Uluru Statement was written. And Anthony Albanese said, I went through this referendum without any compromise, without attempting to get bipartisanship, because this is what First Nations people asked us to do. They wanted the voice. They didn't just want recognition. So basically, Anthony Albanese, he negotiated with one side and then put it to the people and say, I take it as it is. And when he said it's a very gracious, modest request, he's saying they could have asked for a lot more, like be grateful that they only asked for this voice. And so with all of these treaties, it's basically the current Australian elite negotiating in secret with the Aboriginal elite, and they're all getting paid by the taxpayer. Meanwhile, the Australian people, they weren't consulted at all. It was just put to them that, this is what First Nations people want. And Noel Pearson, remember the guilt trip, extending the hand of friendship. That was the thing, that you should just accept, because they've compromised. But there was never any negotiation with the Australian people to work on a model that would be acceptable to them. And this is why Australians, when they're the ones who are part of the focus groups, they said, well, I don't understand the voice, what it's supposed to do. I haven't been given any detail. I don't want to divide the country along racial lines. And then there was obviously people who are worried about more land grabs. They're also worried about the cost of living crisis. We already give the Aboriginals $40 million, the federal government does every year, and there's no progress on closing the gap. And what about solving our cost of living? Like, what about focus on all Australians? And obviously there's a lot of distrust about government post-COVID, because governments abuse that trust that the Australian people full-heartedly put in them to keep them safe from COVID, which wasn't very dangerous. And so they didn't trust the politicians that this was not just a modest request, that it was only going to be an advisory body. And so Anthony Albanese, in question time, he's doubled down and said, "Oh, I don't regret doing what the Uluru Statement and my referendum working group told me to do." And there was an article in The Age today about how the Yes campaign was lost, and it basically mentioned that Anthony Albanese was too. Well, he basically gave the referendum working group everything they wanted. It quotes that Megan Davis, she basically had a veto over any suggestion of compromising to get bipartisan support. And yes, there is, as during the referendum campaign, there are a lot of Australians asking what's happened to the money. Noel Pearson, what did you do with the $550 million for your Cape York partnership? It hasn't closed the gap. Where's all the money gone? And you also should remember that the Labor Party, they support Australia becoming a republic. That's their official policy. Anthony Albanese appointed a Assistant Minister on the Republic, Matt Thistlethwaite, from Kingford Smith electorate. We did vote yes. There's no way an Australian republic is ever going to get up, because obviously if you vote for the change, like Australia becoming a republic, then there's uncertainty, as there would have been with the Voice. The work would only have just begun if the Voice had passed, designing it, legislating it. So it only would have begun there. And of course, more taxpayer expense would have been spent. And Anthony Albanese, on referendum night, he also lashed out at the media, saying, "You all know that the Uluru Statement from the heart is one page." And now, as I mentioned, the leftists, they were calling Australia a horrible racist nation. And it was Australia's Day of Shame. And they quoted these international headlines, like from BBC, CNN, Reuters, that Australia votes no to recognising Indigenous Australians. It fails to reconcile its colonial past, and it's put back reconciliation, which was never meant to be a process with an endpoint. It was always meant to go on, because grievance is a grift, and it's forever, because grievance victimhood, it basically is, well, it excuses failure and blames poor outcomes on other people. So, and it was good to see that there are a lot of Australians in the replies to those international reports saying that's such a biased, superficial report. We know why we voted no. And I could see a lot of them saying, don't do a report about a process that you didn't understand. Don't basically interfere in our affairs. Because remember, that was another blackmail, that, the world won't look good on us. I think it was Pat Dodson who said, we won't be able to criticize China about its human rights record. So that was also that, the rest of the world will think we're continuing to mistreat our First Nations people. And so I'll now play this statement from Isabella Higgins, one of the ABC's many Indigenous reporters, who, well, she basically said that radical Indigenous activists should double down and decide to be, well, more angry at white Australia, or as she put it, I'm not sure if she said white Australia, but you could basically read between the lines, but she did call the Australian regime.
But I think it's also been the conventional wisdom in our communities that when we're talking about reconciliation, we use kind language, we're generous, we extend the hand of friendship, we invite people in to share our culture. And I think if we look at the campaign messaging around the Voice, it was similar to that. So I think this failing, this being rejected so categorically by all Australians, it will change the way Indigenous Australians want to interact with the rest of the country. It will change whether kindness is the best approach. I think often in the community, it is well understood that black anger is not tolerated. And so we see leaders pull in their rage, pull in their sadness, and constantly use language of generosity, use graciousness to try and appeal to the Australian people. And after this, I think there will be a generation of leaders who have been burnt by this and who won't be interested in doing that anymore. I would not be surprised if more people push towards that message that comes from Lydia Thorpe about not engaging so much with mainstream Australia, not bowing to them, challenging the Australian regime. And of course there will be anger. I think even if you weren't a card-carrying yes voter in the Indigenous community, to see the vote, to see Australians reject this so categorically, that's really hard to feel, to experience. The whole debate was very uncomfortable. It felt like at times the worth of an Indigenous life was being debated. So I think the message from people like Lydia Thorpe, the message around black sovereignty will appeal more after this.
So she used the word mainstream Australia, which is basically she didn't say specifically white Australia, but I don't. Who is she defining as mainstream Australia? That's what I'd like to know. Now there was this statement put out on referendum night by people who call themselves the Indigenous Australians who supported the Voice referendum. So they are observing a week of silence, and will be lowering our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags to half-mast for the week of silence to acknowledge this result. We ask others to do the same. Now, Isabella Higgins, she is completely wrong to say that this was a vote on the value of Indigenous Australians. That is absolute crap. It was a vote on, well, giving a group of Australians extra rights. I mean, they have the same rights on, well, the lands that are governed by Australian law as every other Australian. And she mentioned Lydia Thorpe, who was a progressive no. She was obviously satisfied with the no result. And according to her, it's now time to call in the United Nations to sort out Australia and help out the Black Sovereign movement.
The Prime Minister has an opportunity to implement the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody, the Bringing Them Home report, and they could even pass the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, which I'll be putting to the Parliament floor in December. So we've still got work to do, and we need those 7 million people to tell this government to implement those recommendations that'll save our lives today.
So should the British Parliament and the German Parliament, should they pass this declaration on the rights of Indigenous people? Because they're Indigenous people in the British Isles and the country of Germany are being trampled on by foreign invaders. Or can white countries never be invaded? Now, another thing that Isabella Higgins said, that black anger isn't tolerated. It's always been about kindness and extending the arm of friendship. Well, that's not what a lot of us seen. Remember this angry Aboriginal lady who gave this expletive-ridden spray outside the Labor Party National Conference a couple of months ago.
I'm a Jagger, a matriarchal woman. How fucking dare you come here with your politics? You get the fuck out of our nation and let us traditional owners deal with our shit. These are all handsomely funded. Look at this. We got parkings over in that fucking park that my grandfather sanctioned. You get fucked. You want to listen, cunt? You come closer. Where's my bundi? Get my fucking bundi. He's all to be ashamed of your fucking selves. All he is. He's totally disrespect us traditional owners. Look, with your fucking handsomely funded foundations and trust funds. Where's the black fellas here? Put your fucking hands up. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Uncle. Get my fucking bundi. You want to talk politics? You come and sit at my fucking table. When are you going to sit at our fucking tables? Hey? You like to fund them? You're funding the wrong mob. Fucking pathetic, he's making me sick.
She's a charmer, and charming at the end, just dumping the mic on the ground. So the interference runs there, and the leftist white zombies just clap her. Now, I didn't know that fucking and cunt were traditional Aboriginal words. Maybe it's a part of Aboriginal English. Those fucking cunt no voters gave us a terrible, strong, proper one. I think that's how it might be in Aboriginal English. I don't know. Now, I've spent over an hour on The Voice. There's a few other things that to wrap this conversation up. So I'm not sure if you saw the headline that the Australian cricketers, they'll be offered counselling by Cricket Australia after the no vote. So I don't know, are they going to put their bats out for The Voice? Because Cricket Australia, like all the other major sporting codes, supported the yes vote. So the Australian Cricketers Association has written to past and present players, let them know counselling services are available if they experience any issues as a result of the expected no vote. So they've had a terrible 2020 World Cup in India. They can't bowl, can't bat. I think they should focus more on getting counselling for their poor cricket of recent times rather than for The Voice, which, well, they just because they are sports stars doesn't mean their votes stand for more or they're able to convince anyone. All the sports stars, celebrities, comedians, they're not coping very well. Somebody mentioned Isla Fisher, Sacha Baron Cohen's wife, who is going off her brain on her Instagram about the no vote. And obviously, we have, where am I at here? I'll go now briefly to the update on the New Zealand vote. So there's still special votes to be counted, but it does look like that the National Party, the main centre-right party, and the Libertarian ACT Party, they will just scrape over the line 61 out of 121 for a bare majority, so they won't have to have Winston Peters, won't have to rely on his New Zealand First Party and their 8 seats. Winston Peters, as I said on the Trad Tasman Talk coverage, you can't trust him. He has gone with the 3 out of the 3 coalition governments that he's back since the introduction of their mixed member proportional representation system. He's chosen Labor twice. At the next election, he's always voted out, but he comes back the next election telling New Zealand voters what they wanted to hear. So his main campaign pitch was against co-governance and also curtailing the trans agenda. So he's back in Parliament. He's 78 years old, though he's still sharp as a tack compared to Joe Biden. The racist Maori Party, they won 4 of the 7 Maori electorates. They have these racist seats, so they already have Maori people have extra votes, which when I interviewed Julian Batchelor from Stop Co-Governance, he said that these Maori seats, they're not part of the Treaty of Waitangi. They can be abolished, and they should be, because all New Zealanders, they should be equal. Chris Luxon, the designate Prime Minister, he only wants to roll back co-governance in health and education, still wants to keep it for resources. And like in Australia, all of these royalties that are paid to these Indigenous corporations, there's a lot of corruption of the royalties. The wealth is not spread around like they're supposed to be in a de facto communist jurisdiction. So Chris Luxon, it looks like even though he's going to be in coalition with the Libertarian Party, it seems like he's not going to roll back all of the left-wing policies. That then this is the thing about left-wing governments, Labor parties in all throughout the Anglosphere. When they get into the government, they put their ideas, policies into practice, and make sure that they're entrenched. And when the Conservative Party get into power, they hardly repeal any of it. And that certainly needs to change. Obviously, Albanese, he couldn't change the constitution without putting it to a public vote. And this is the mistake that the Labor Party in Australia always believes when they win a federal election, whether it be Gough in 72, Rudd in 07. They think that this will usher in a new progressive social change era for Australia. And they also thought the Yes campaign, they thought they could, that achieving social change was easy after the same-sex marriage postal survey, which passed with, it wasn't compulsory, 79% of Australians participated. It was 61.6% yes, and 38.4% no. And obviously, it was still the parliament. It wasn't going to be inserted into the constitution. It was a legislative change, and there was a bill ready to go. That was the Smith Bill. I know that a lot of people in this chat would have been no to same-sex marriage, but it was a much more straightforward proposition for Australians to understand. And obviously there was they knew more gay people than they did Aboriginal people, and there was more, I'm just comparing the two roughly, and there was also more unity within the LGBT community, that they wanted this, where there was more division in the Aboriginal community. And there was also, obviously, this was about the voice giving extra rights, where obviously with the same-sex marriage vote, again, a lot of you will disagree, but the message of the yes for same-sex marriage was about equality. So same-sex couples can have weddings. Everyone knows what a wedding is and what's entailed with that. Now, let's go to the National Socialist Network's latest publicity stunt, which they really ratcheted it up even to a high level. This was on Saturday morning at 2 a.m, so after Friday night. They were filmed by a passerby at Flinders Street Station, who then followed them onto a train, and they unfurled a banner at Flinders Street Station which read "Expose Jewish Power." I'll play the footage that the Daily Mail put on their website, and then we'll have a look at how, well, Channel 7 in particular reported on it. Now, all the NSN guys were wearing masks on that occasion. Normally, there's a number of them, including the ones who have been doxxed by Antifa. They're certainly not deterred when they're doxxed by Antifa. They just take their masks off because, well, I've got nothing to lose now. But they all had masks on there. Though I'm sure that Cass Ross is already studying the various physiques of the NSN members who are in that video and maybe doing voice recognition. You can certainly hear Thomas Sewell's voice there. Now, Victoria Police, as you can see, they accompanied them on the train, and the next day there was outrage that, well, they were given a chaperone and they weren't arrested on the spot. This was the 7 News report that aired on Saturday evening.
Police have watched on as neo-Nazis staged a march through Melbourne's CBD, terrorising commuters. The group was filmed performing Nazi salutes as they boarded a train, asking commuters if they were Jewish.
Hidden under masks, the group gathered around 1:30 a.m, first at State Parliament, then at Flinders Street Station, with a banner reading "Expose Jewish Power," before doing the Nazi salute on an escalator heading to a Werribee Line train.
Victoria is the neo-Nazi capital of the country, and when I saw those images, my heart was ripped out.
One report said the white supremacists handed out cards for the National Socialist Network and confronted one commuter who had a blue and white handkerchief, asking if he was Jewish.
They simply cannot be allowed to roam public transport freely and target individuals just because of their race or their background.
The intimidating group of around 24 also sang a White Australia anthem. Australia. Police following them the whole way.
They should have arrested them. If this isn't incitement, I don't know what is. It seems to me as though we're chaperoning these thugs. We're not stopping them.
I was heartbroken that Victoria Police did not arrest, put a stop to this ugliness, to this outrage, to this despicable evil.
Police say there was not a breach of the peace, no reported incidents and no offences detected. It was just a few hours after a peaceful rally at Caulfield Park to support Israel. The Nazi salute is not yet illegal in Victoria. The proposal to outlaw it is still before Parliament. The maximum penalties set to be a fine of more than $23,000 or 12 months jail, or both.
It's unthinkable, it's unimaginable, it's not Victorian.
Paul Dowsley, 7 News.
And now, Paul Dowsley, he's probably the least worst reporter at Channel 7. And the politician that you saw there was Deputy Liberal leader David Southwick. And it was actually him back at the beginning of 2020 that floated the swastika ban. He's the member for Caulfield. I think he identifies as part Jewish. Obviously, Caulfield is where a lot of Melbourne's Jewish community lives. And now he championed the swastika ban, and obviously De Vere, he was Abramovich, who you saw there, where he said he felt as if his heart had been ripped out. Shouldn't, after we saw last week, where literally the hearts were shot of Israelis at that music festival, like actually shot, like that's actually violence, yet he's still talking about metaphorical violence. And now I think the Nazi salute, the legislation to ban it, is before the upper house. So this was basically one last hurrah by the National Socialist Network to do a Nazi salute in public before the ban comes into effect. And Nathan Bull, who is one of the normally unmasked NSN members, decided to mock De Vere the next day. With his quote, Melbourne has become the neo-Nazi capital of the country, and what they're trying to do is declare war on the migrant community. And so Nathan Bull on a train with lots of migrants there, doing the Nazi salute. He's previously done a stunt with Michael Nelson Mickle, where they went to an Iranian women's rights protest in the CBD. Mickle was live just before with White Australia First. I think it's fair to assume that Mickle was there on Friday night. Now, keeping I mentioned Cass Ross before, that she's probably studying the physiques of the NSN members, because it's due to, well, basically her having no life, because her day job is actually Asian studies researcher at the University of Tasmania. She does this in her spare time, which basically she watches everything that we do. She's probably watching this as well. She was quoted in an ABC Investigations piece by Kevin Ewan and Pat McGrath, notorious neo-Nazis, likely architects of menacing video directed at Lydia Thorpe. And so it goes down here, and they studied the meta data, because the file name of the Telegram upload was Horp New Vid Jimbo Triple D, and mentions that Jimbo is a nickname of Jamoan Roberts. He also has other nicknames such as the Vanilla Gorilla, the Aryan Barbarian, and Caucasian Catch. And so it quotes Cass Ross down here. She says that I have zero doubts in my mind that it was Jim Roberts and Stephanos Oraculus, Australian Meditations video. Dr. Ross has spent hours watching and listening to Roberts and Oraculus talk this year as part of her research, which is in her spare time. Like, she has no bloody life. No one in the NSN movement but Roberts has that physique. He has a certain way of pronouncing words which are very inconsonantic. And remember that the voice of the masked man in that video by the loyalists of the warriors of the convict resistance was masked, was distorted, the voice. Now, Jimbo, he addressed this on his Telegram channel, which I'll bring up here. Not sure if you can read it. So this is his second channel. It's called Jimbo 2, Hyper Boran Bogaloo. So Jimbo says, making me look good in it, no matter how they spin it. Shout out to Cass Ross for weighing in on this, pun intended. Yeah, entirely intended. And there's two known photos of her, and she's looks as fat as Magda Shabansky. I mean, if she's spending all her time watching Jim and Mehdi videos, then she could have gotten larger there. And so she says, I can't, and then Jimbo says, I should say, I can't imagine it's easy to pry yourself away from your extensive study of my physique in between fudge pops, of course. Now, we had Lydia Thorpe today. She interchanges with her solidarity with oppressed people. So this was her in the federal parliament today. Have I got it here? I've got so many different things that I need to upload. Oh yeah, here I got it here. So Lydia Thorpe turned up to the federal Senate today in a what's called a black and white keffiyeh, which was worn by a lot of the pro-Palestinian protesters in the rallies in Melbourne and Sydney on the weekend. So it's basically seen as a symbol of showing solidarity with the Palestinians. Now, the New South Wales Police and government, they backed away from their threat to shut down Sunday's rally because they didn't have a permit. But then they decided that they couldn't stop thousands of people gathering in Hyde Park, a central location. Obviously, they could stop people in New South Wales Police gathering and protesting during COVID, but not on this occasion. I mean, the New South Wales Police are taking on a mob of thousands of Muslims. I mean, that's why they stood back at the Sydney Opera House on Monday night, even while "Gas the Jews" was being chanted, because the police, they part of their job description is to keep the peace, and certainly there was no physical violence at the Sydney Opera House protest. There was just that, it can't be argued that saying "Gas the Jews" is free speech. I mean, it is incitement. But according to the 9 News coverage, the Sydney and Melbourne pro-Palestinian rallies were largely peaceful. There was 6,000 in Sydney, and there were 10,000 in Melbourne. So the New South Wales Police ended not using the extraordinary powers that they could use to search people attending that rally. In Sydney, there was a man that Chris Coveries interviewed who talked about genociding the Jews. That goes for about 5 minutes, so I'm not going to play it. And Chris Coveries always gets shitty with people playing his footage without attribution. He's kind of quite anal about that sort of thing. I don't really have a relationship with him. He's quite the peculiar libertarian. But down in Melbourne, this was a man shouting.
Fuck the river, fuck the sea, death to every Israeli! Hold on.
So he wasn't removed or anything. Now, the Australian Jewish Association was posting videos of this. That's led by David Adler, and was calling for those who were chanting pro Hamas and anti or destruction to Israel chants should have been arrested. There was one volatile moment at the Melbourne protest when a flare was lit, because Victoria Police they hate flares, and so they barged their way in. So one of the protesters threw a water bottle at the police. So yeah, Victoria Police they step in if there's a flare. That's absolutely beyond the pale. Maybe they just could have said no, it's a smoking ceremony flare. It's a traditional Aboriginal flare. Now, there has been pro-Palestine rallies across the Western world, and now the initial reaction to the Hamas terror attacks in southern Israel was from Western governments that they stood with Israel. Emmanuel Macron tried to ban pro-Palestinian rallies, but when you've imported for decades and decades Muslims from Northern Africa, well, you're going to be overpowered, and that's what happened. Despite the French police using all their counter-riot tactics, the police in Berlin, they banned a pro-Palestinian rally, yet people still turned up. I mean, one thing you have to say about the Muslim Arabs as a whole, they have got more collective will to confront Western governments than a lot of the native citizens did during the COVID lockdowns there. And also in France, there was another stabbing of a teacher. If I just go to the story, I've got so many things open. Sorry, just give me a moment. Anyway, there was a teacher stabbed to death in France who was, which was deemed a terrorist attack. So obviously, this is not new to France. There are always these lone wolves. A lot of them shout Allahu Akbar, which, remember, according to the Obama administration, is workplace violence. I've gone over an hour and a half, but there's just so much news to cover. So I'm probably going to go a full 2 hours. And now over in the US, a number of Harvard University student bodies, they are facing backlash for signing a letter condemning Israel. And so there is now calls for the names of those individuals who signed that letter condemning Israel in the aftermath of the attacks, to be basically blacklisted if they try to apply for a permit in, or if they tend to apply for a job in Wall Street. Let me just find this article. Yes, here it is here from Breitbart. So billionaire Bill Akin calls on Harvard to release names of students supporting terrorism against Israel. And so he's called, he said that so employers don't inadvertently hire pro-terrorist graduates in the future. I'll just go back to Australian news at the moment. There was also the arrest of 3 men aged 30, 31, and 40, who performed a Nazi salute outside the Sydney Holocaust Museum. We don't know if they were maybe Arab Muslims or white neo-Nazis. And so they all were in the same van, and they basically there was a police sweep of the area in case, I don't know, they thought there was a terrorist attack going to be planned from that van. And there was also a man in a Muslim man in Bellevue Hill who's been charged with intimidation and banned from the eastern suburbs of Sydney for what he said to Jewish men displaying the Israeli flag on the car. I swear you're about fucking serious with that flag of fucking cruiser. Tell you right now. And also, there are calls by Davir Abramovich for the AFL to stand with Israel and condemn the Hamas attack, since they make a statement on every other recent terror attack, including Brenton Tarrant in Christchurch. And remember, they also stood with the BLM rioters, and remember they all took a knee in 2020. I think the AFL, after a lot of footy fans would have voted no. Majority of Victorians did. They should stick to their knitting. Corporate Australia should stay out of politics, and they shouldn't fire discipline people for having political beliefs on their own. They should just be focused on customer service, looking after their employees, and also making a profit so they can continue as well. But back to US news. So we had there was a anti-Muslim hate murder. A 71-year-old landlord killed a 6-year-old boy and wounded his mother because of their Muslim faith in response to the war between Israel and Hamas. So Joseph M. Kuzba, 71, she looks like a real he's on death's door. Looks like basically a skeleton himself. That is absolutely horrific. It's bad enough, all the death that has been in Israel-Palestine and the Middle East. None more needs to be brought over to the West. Now, obviously, it's not surprising that Ben Shapiro, the co-founder of the Daily Wire, has been outspoken with the US needs to support Israel in its war in Hamas. And he shared on his Twitter. I've got so many things here. Just bear with me, and a sign that it's such an epic show. I've got all of these things, but I'll play because remember when Ben Shapiro, when he was attacked by the Groypers, that he wanted the US to fight for Israel. This is what he said back then in defense of himself, and this is what he said last week.
They say that I want America to fight wars for Israel. Nope. First of all, Israel can take care of herself. If Israel is forced to the wall, the possibility of nuclear exchange is extremely high. That is why it is very important that the United States provide the material aid to Israel.
Now, Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, was in Israel with the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and he said that Israel can defend itself, but we still want to give it all of our military equipment paid by the US taxpayers. Now, Ben Shapiro, he shared the purported photo of a charcoal burned dead Jewish baby. Now, many people claimed that this was an AI generated image, though that was disputed because it's claimed that a lot of legitimate photos, if you put it through an AI generator, because it picks up pixels, it can basically claim that most photos are AI generated. But it does seem to be not true that Hamas beheaded 40 babies. There certainly have been babies killed by Hamas. This was another image that was released by Israel of a bloody child's bed. The thing is, sympathy is already on the Israeli government's side. So why do you need to relay? It was basically hearsay by one Israeli soldier. The IDF couldn't verify it. Like, why do you need to be caught in an untruth, which discredits other claims of atrocities by Hamas that you're making? Why not admit that that was actually not correct, but just point to all the other dead Israelis that Hamas has killed? Now, Alex Jones, now he's been a solid stander with Israel. Though, given that the neocons, Joe Biden still wants to fund Ukraine and Israel, and obviously the neocons think that the US can continue to be the world's policeman and should get involved in every single war. Nikki Haley and Lindsey Graham are the two biggest neocon warmongers in the US Congress, both at the Republican Party. And so this is what Alex Jones, he's had enough of all of these, as you'll see here, these demands are placed upon, his people, the US people, when it comes to Israel and the Middle East.
Why do conservatives who've done nothing to Israel deserve to be persecuted and attacked like Hitler did in the beginning? Deplatforming, putting us in ghettos, lying about us, demonizing us. We can't take the news saying white people are terrorists and Christians are bad people. And you're like, well, we're not doing that. The point is, if you speak out against it, people will listen. My grandfather stood up for the Jews. Both of them almost out of the Army Air Corps. And I don't claim you owe me some debt, but at the same time, I don't owe you anything. And I am tired of being attacked. And the white supremacists make a joke, oh, Jones pleads to his masters. I have been a friend to Israel. I have been nice. But it's time for Jews, particularly, to choose a side. Are you with the West? Are you with right to self-defense? Are you against communism? Or do you embrace those tenets? And if you embrace communism and disarmament and enslavement, then go. Then get killed. I'm not the one killing you. Go kill yourself. Take your children with you. I'm sorry you're going to get them killed too. I'm not saying I want your kids killed, but your bizarre behavior is causing this. Let us control our countries and stop them coming here. Don't have the ADL attack me. Don't you point your finger at me trying to survive and live and say I'm the bad person. I reject that. And I'm sick of you opening our damn borders up to bring all these people in and brainwash them against us because I'm white. I'm not a person that's in identity politics, but you've made it that way. Everywhere it's bad because I'm white. Everywhere it's bad because I'm Christian. Everywhere I don't deserve to have a job because of what color I am. Everywhere I'm a bad person. No. You're your own worst enemy, not me. I don't want to kill you. I don't want to hurt you. I wish you prosperity.
And this is what a lot of, particularly the white nationalists, have pointed out, that Jews in Western countries, they've supported mass immigration and open borders. They believe that for Western nations, diversity is a strength. But they're discovering this week, with all of these Muslim enclaves that have grown in major Western cities such as New York, Toronto, Berlin. In fact, in Berlin, there are Jewish homes are being targeted again with the Star of David out the front. And so this is, will they realize what they've done? That they've imported their Middle Eastern enemy en masse, and they might have the ear of President Emmanuel Macron, and Rishi Sunak, but despite the fact that they're trying to deter the Muslim Arabs who are now in their country from protesting, there's so many of them now, and they all get a vote. They've reaped what they're sowed. I mean, Jews in Western nations now, they should not support mass immigration anymore, because don't you realize now they've actually imported your enemy? Because they're actually Jewish Australians who are fleeing the violence in Israel who now don't feel safe coming back home. Obviously, we should not fight a war for Israel. We should not fight a war on behalf of any country, only support the defense of our own country. The neocon blackmail, it's the same as the war on terror. You're either stand with Israel or with the terrorism. And the intellectual dark web types, when it comes to supporting Israel to the hilt, they absolutely trash their belief in free speech. So I'm not sure if you saw the post by the tweet comparison by Dave Rubin this week. I'll just bring it up now. As you can see, this is an epic show. So Dave Rubin said, in 2022, peaceful protests now illegal in Canada. Wonder what happens in a society which doesn't allow its citizens to congregate and air their grievances freely. Any ideas? And when France banned pro-Palestinian protests, he says maybe the West has a chance. There was obviously then a Jordan Peterson. Because we have the IDF mobilized at the Gaza border. It sort of reminds me of the Russian build-up before the invasion of Ukraine. The mobilization builds up and then they go in. He said, give them hell, Netanyahu. Enough is enough. And also Claire Lehman, who is the editor of Colette, that elitist intellectual dark web publication. These people like Claire Lehman, Dave Rubin, and Jordan Peterson, they claim, we're revolting against the elites. They're just fighting with other elites. Claire Lehman tweeted about the London protests against Israel. Immigrants rallying for blood and soil ethno-nationalism. Do they not get the contradiction? Do you not get the contradiction, Claire? I mean, you're standing with a blood and soil ethno-nationalist state in Israel. The Jews, they have created a Jewish state because they believe that they're God's chosen people and that Israel and Jerusalem belongs to them. You're not aware of your own contradiction there, Claire Lehman. Yeah, so you should never trust these intellectual dark web types. And now, obviously, there has been initial reaction in Western nations, 100% stand with Israel, but a lot of now with the impending invasion of Gaza and the fact that Hamas use Palestinians and children as human shields, and the fact that Israel has cut off the water and the electricity and food to Gaza. There is now concern that Israel will go too far. There will be a huge loss of life, humanitarian disaster. And so this is what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said in her in one of her social media messages. So this was her take on, she's part of Democratic Socialists of America. This is what she said about the impending Israel-Hamas war.
United States, our responsibility is to the stability and the security of the region. That means being able to support, yes, Israel in its defensive capacities, right, in its ability in that context, but it also means that the United States has a responsibility to ensure accountability to human rights, to prevent the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, and to ensure that horrors do not happen in the names of victims who do not want their tragedy used to justify further violence and injustice.
Right.
Beautifully said.
Was that a fart at the end of AOC's statement there? Let's put her camera under infrared thermal measurement to see if it was a fart from her. Let's just play the fart again.
In the names of victims who do not want their tragedy used to justify.
Yes, that does sound like look like the fart came from her. Now, there was a community note about this, that footage recorded using visible light frequencies can never reveal infrared using purely software procedures, that the information doesn't exist to begin with. Infrared footage can only be recorded from cameras recording infrared to begin with. But it definitely, that sounds distinctively like a fart. And remember, AOC, under her Green New Deal, cow farts would be taxed. She's just let out a huge gas emission there. So I think she should have to pay a tax for that there. And she is not the first Democrat to let rip. The first was Eric Swalwell. Back in 2019 when he was on Hardball with Chris Matthews. This was the original Fartgate back then.
The evidence is uncontradicted that the president used taxpayer dollars to ask the Ukrainians to help him cheat an election. And the complaint that I've heard from...
Yeah, that sounds like a fart, though. MSNBC ran cover for him and said it was actually a person in the MSNBC studio dragging a mug across the table. Though you can clearly see, if you slow down that footage, and I won't because we're running out of time, you can clearly see him pause for a split second, his movement and his voice, and the fart comes out. Now, I have never let out an on-air fart, not that I know of, though I'm happy to be corrected. I mean, I'm all under control down there. But let's hear from Eric Swalwell about his take on AOC's Fartgate 2.0.
After reviewing the original AOC fart video, I've concluded that it is authentic. Look, we all know I'm the most reliable expert on this matter, and my word is as good as fact. She farted on video, and it wasn't even live video. She could have edited it out, but she treated it like a silent but deadly and acted like nothing happened.
Yes, she farted, and she still hasn't addressed this. Now, I should also say that is an AI-generated video of Eric Swalwell, but it certainly wasn't an AI-generated image of him with that Chinese spy that worked for him a decade ago. That was not AI generated. That Chinese spy actually worked for him. Now, over in the UK, there was obviously a huge pro-Palestine rally in London. They weren't deterred by Home Secretary Suella Braverman saying waving a Palestinian flag may be a criminal offense. Like, you shouldn't believe Suella Braverman when she says she's going to crack down on anything. And she said in the aftermath of the pro Palestine rally in London. So I've still got all of these. I hope to be done very shortly. So she said, thank you to police officers who work so hard in difficult circumstances to manage tens of thousands of protesters. Numerous risks made out of result of pockets of disorder, violence and hate. To all those who saw fit to promote genocide, glorify terrorism, mock the murder of Jewish people, including women and babies, the police are coming for you. That sounds like another empty threat from Suella Braverman. I think those protesting in London know that, well, she's never going to stop the boats. She's never going to send illegals to Rwanda. And But I don't know. When it comes to standing with Israel, the government officials they are prepared to take. But obviously, we saw in Sydney, given that there was such a huge Muslim community that wanted to protest, and obviously, and this is the thing that the Labor Party, the reason why Chris Minns back for them saying we respect the right to protest is because they want the votes of Muslims in Western Sydney. So Keir Starmer, he wants the votes of Muslims in the general election next year. So does Sadiq Khan, who's Muslim himself. Though there was a bomb that was thrown on Sir Keir Starmer, the Labor opposition leader, at the Labor Party conference. It was a glitter bomb.
True democracy is citizen-led. Politics needs an update. We demand a people's house. We demand a people's house. We are in crisis. We are in crisis. Our whole future is deafening.
A shocking security breach there. Now, I think he was trying to make a statement with his glitter bomb that the House of Lords should become a people's house like the Senate is in Australia, not have the Lords peerage anymore, where government ministers basically get pensioned off to be in the House of Lords. Now, the UK media, obviously, they've been covering the events in Israel, and Sky News UK, they brought us breaking news earlier this week from Jerusalem.
Breaking news, and the presenter Holly Willoughby has told ITV that she will not return to host This Morning.
Yes, live news from Jerusalem. Holly Willoughby, she has resigned from This Morning, using, I think, the cover of that kidnap and murder plot by that super duper fatso Gavin Plump, who was actually on a BBC documentary many years back, explaining how he couldn't leave his house because he was too fat.
I physically just can't walk to my front door and back again without being in a lot of pain.
This is the man who was arrested for trying to kidnap and murder Holly Willoughby. Gavin Plum is an ex-Pizza Hut worker who quit his job because of his weight. He once starred in a BBC feature on weight loss, where he claimed he only ever left his flat to go to the communal bins. Holly Willoughby pulled out of This Morning at the last minute on
Yes. Yeah, so he quit his job at Pizza Hut. Did he eat all the pizzas? As I said last week, was he planning to kidnap Holly Willoughby to eat her? Holly Willoughby is obviously the name that Katie Hopkins gives Holly Willoughby. Now, Holly Willoughby, she'd already gone into police hiding protection from this fat stalker, and so she put out a statement. Her publicist would have explaining her departure from This Morning, but there actually is a video message of Holly Willoughby talking about leaving This Morning.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Dermot O'Dreary here. Holly wants to have a word with you. Over to you, Holly.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It has come with the deepest regret that after years of boring the absolute shit out of you, I have decided to quit. I'm going to use the fact of that fat fucker that was planning on murdering me as an excuse. But the truth is, ever since that silver-haired wanker was exposed for finger blasting the runner's shithole, I have received nothing but negativity. I've read all the comments on Face Replace to take my boring ass off the telly, so I'll help you out by quitting. You will no longer have to tolerate me plastered all over your TV each morning. Thanks, and hopefully you won't have to hear from me again.
Thanks for watching, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Vignal says, all right, this is all fake what? TNE is just fake news now. Well, I'd like to inject humor and satire in the news. And I'm a firm belief that AI, deep fakes, should only be used for comedic news satire purposes, which is what Face Replace does. And I mean, is it really much different than what Holly Willoughby is thinking? Now, I saw that Ron Nelson has said, Tim, get with it. Get with being a nationalist. How about promoting a referendum on immigration and abortion? Well, I would support a referendum, a plebiscite on further mass immigration into Australia. But remember what Fraser Anning said in his maiden speech. He wanted a public vote on mass immigration as a final solution. He was basically destroyed and character assassinated. And we didn't give in this referendum the answer that the elites in both parties wanted, and so they won't be asking us for a vote for another vote anytime soon. In fact, Peter Dutton has walked back his pledge to hold a second referendum just on recognition. He said that Australians are over referendums for now. We'll reformulate our policy in time for the next election, so they will only. I would support that, support a vote, but it's not. But it's. I'm a realist. They're not going to ask us a question that they don't like the answer to. I know that Leith Van Onselen over in Macro Business said we should have a vote on it. I agree, but I'm also a realist. And sadly, with abortion, the public polling shows that Australians are pro-abortion, pro-euthanasia. If they actually saw how brutal and sadistic and bloody abortion procedures were, basically how the baby is sucked out and basically hacked, its body parts hacked off. It is absolutely disgusting. If they saw that, if they saw the movie Unplanned, they'd all be pro-life. Now, that's the end of Tim's News Explosion for tonight. Thank you for coming through the 2-hour post-voice special. I'll be back tomorrow night. Now, I apologize that my interview with Teresa Van Lyshout that I promoted last night didn't take place. That was due to a scheduling error on my part. I've just been so busy with organising the referendum, a referendum and New Zealand election coverage. They gave Teresa the wrong date, but we are going to be merging the interview into the Theorist tomorrow. So both Mai and Andy are going to introduce Teresa, and obviously her legal persecution has ended. She was forced to plead guilty. She got sentenced to 2 months prison and a $200 fine, but she's free now. So she served 7 months in prison on remand, 8 months of house arrest, where she was forcibly drugged for 12 months, all because she declared herself the Governor General and imported some fake badges to have her own police force. She wasn't going to take over the country. They wanted to make an example of her during COVID. Now she's finally free of her bail conditions. She can now speak for herself, upload to social media, and also leave the state of South Australia. So I'll see you all on the Theorist YouTube channel, 9 p.m. tomorrow night with myself, Andy Nolch, Teresa Van Lyshout. It'll be the final Theorist for a little while, because Andy Nolch is then going to Queensland to film his Barrier Reef documentary. So thank you for going through with me on this extended post-voice referendum show. I think we can maybe keep celebrating. They say it's never good to gloat, but yes, it is. You lost, all of you anti-Australian hating leftist wankers. So I hope that you stay silent and mourn forever. I hope that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags are taken down permanently. We should, Australia Day should now be 100% celebrated by our government institutions. You should be able to carry an Australian flag in the CBD on Australia Day. We should end the welcome to countries. No more Uncle Colin at AFL games. Get rid of that. We are Australia. We have one flag, one anthem. We are one people, one country, under one law and one constitution. Australia has come back. It has risen again. We are back. but there will be plenty. There will be a counter-offensive by the communist, cultural, Marxist, anti-Australian left. Don't you worry about that. But we have shown that we can defeat them. Good night, everybody. And I love Australia. I'm a proud Australian. I'm a proud Victorian as well. Good night, everybody.
Tim's News Explosion. 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 Tim's News Explosion.